The first time Ethan Carter saw Professor Adrian Blake outside the lecture hall, he wished he hadn't, not because he disliked him. No, it was the opposite. Adrian Blake was the kind of man people notice without trying. Tall, composed, always dressed in crisp shirts that made him look like he belonged in a boardroom instead of a university. His voice carried calm authority, the kind that made even the noisiest class fall silent. Ethan had always been careful about everything, about his grades, his behavior, his future. Coming from a modest background, he couldn't afford mistakes. And yet, somehow, he made the biggest mistake of his life in a single night. It happened during a legal documentation workshop held off campus. The university had arranged it for final year students, a long day filled with lectures, paperwork simulations, and mock legal procedures. Ethan had gone, determined to learn something useful. At the end of the day, there was a group exercise. Students were paired randomly and asked to process a set of legal forms under time pressure. Marriage registration documents were included as part of the exercise. Just practice, nothing serious. Or at least, that's what Ethan thought. He had been paired with Professor Blake. At first, Ethan assumed it was just coincidence. Professors were supervising multiple groups, stepping in to guide students. But somehow, Adrian stayed with him the entire time. "Focus," Adrian had said calmly, watching Ethan struggle with the forms. "You're overthinking it." "I'm not," Ethan replied nervously. "I just don't want to mess this up." "You won't," Adrian said. "Just follow the structure." Ethan didn't notice when the mock forms were mixed with real ones. He didn't notice when signatures became legally binding. He didn't notice anything at all until 3 days later. It was early morning when Ethan got the call. "Mr. Carter, your marriage registration has been approved." Ethan froze. "I'm sorry, what?" There was a pause on the other end. "You and Mr. Adrian Blake. Your documents were processed successfully." Ethan felt like the ground disappeared beneath him. "That's not possible," he said quickly. "That was a workshop. It was a simulation." "The documents submitted were real," the voice replied. "You may collect your certificate any time." Ethan hung up without another word. His hands were shaking. This had to be a mistake. It had to be. But deep down, a terrible realization was forming. He remembered signing. He remembered Adrian signing too. And suddenly, everything made sense in the worst possible way. Ethan ran to the university, his heart racing. He didn't care about classes or schedules. He went straight to the faculty building, ignoring the looks he got from others. When he reached Adrian's office, he didn't knock. He pushed the door open. Adrian was sitting at his desk, reading something, completely calm, as if nothing had happened. "Tell me this is a joke," Ethan said, breathless. Adrian looked up slowly. For a moment, their eyes met. And then Adrian sighed. "So you found out." Ethan's chest tightened. "You knew?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. "You knew this whole time?" "I found out yesterday," Adrian replied. "I was going to tell you." "You were going to tell me?" Ethan almost laughed, but it came out broken. "We're married. Do you understand that? Married." Adrian stood up, his expression serious but controlled. "I understand perfectly." "Then why are you so calm?" Ethan demanded. "This is my life." "And mine," Adrian said quietly. That stopped Ethan for a second. The room fell silent. "I didn't plan this," Adrian continued. "But the documents were real. The signatures are valid. Legally, this is binding." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to think. "There has to be a way to fix this," he said. "We can cancel it, right? Annulment or something." Adrian hesitated. "It's not that simple." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What do you mean, not simple?" "The paperwork was processed under full consent," Adrian explained. "No evidence of coercion, no error in identity. It will take time, and until then..." "Until then what?" Adrian looked at him. "We're legally married." Ethan felt trapped. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had plans, goals, a future carefully built step by step. And now everything felt like it was slipping out of his control. "I can't do this," Ethan said, backing away slightly. "I'm your student. This is wrong." "I know," Adrian said, "which is why we need to be careful." "Careful?" Ethan repeated. Yes. No one can find out. Not yet. Ethan stared at him. You're worried about your reputation, he said bitterly. I'm worried about yours too, Adrian replied. If this gets out, it won't just affect me. It will affect your education, your future. Ethan didn't want to admit it, but Adrian was right. Still, it didn't make the situation any easier. So what now? Ethan asked quietly. Adrian took a breath. For now, we act normal, and we work on resolving this legally. And until then, Adrian hesitated again. Then he said something Ethan wasn't expecting. There's one more complication. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. What complication? Adrian looked at him carefully. The housing records. Ethan frowned. What about them? Adrian walked over to his desk and picked up a file. Because we are legally married, he said, the system automatically updated your status. Ethan's heart started pounding again. What does that mean? Adrian met his eyes. It means we've been assigned shared accommodation. For a moment, Ethan didn't understand. And then it hit him. No, he said immediately. No, that's not happening. It's already been approved, Adrian said, effective immediately. Ethan felt like he couldn't breathe. You're saying I have to live with you? I'm saying, Adrian replied calmly, that legally we're considered a married couple, and the system treats us as such. Ethan stepped back, shaking his head. This is insane. I agree, Adrian said, but his voice was steady, too steady, and somehow that made everything worse. That evening, Ethan stood outside the apartment building, staring at the key in his hand. He didn't want to go in. He didn't want this to be real. But it was. Taking a deep breath, he unlocked the door. Inside, the apartment was quiet, clean, organized. Adrian was already there, standing by the window, waiting. Ethan stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adrian turned. I made sure you have your own space, he said. You don't have to feel uncomfortable. Ethan let out a shaky breath. Too late for that. Adrian didn't respond. And in that silence, something shifted. Because for the first time, this wasn't just a mistake anymore. It was real. They were living together, bound by something neither of them chose. And neither of them knew what would happen next. The first night in the apartment felt longer than any night Ethan had ever lived through. He stayed inside his room, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the unfamiliar walls. Everything felt wrong. The silence, the space, the fact that just a few feet away, his professor, his husband, was in the same home. He kept repeating it in his mind, hoping it would start to feel less unreal. It didn't. A soft knock on the door broke his thoughts. Ethan, Adrian's voice came, calm as always. You should eat something. I'm not hungry, Ethan replied quickly. There was a pause. Then, you haven't eaten since morning. Ethan clenched his fists. I said I'm not hungry. Another silence. I'll leave the food outside your door, Adrian said quietly, in case you change your mind. Footsteps faded. Ethan stared at the door for a long time, before finally getting up and opening it. The plate was still warm. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he picked it up. Days turned into weeks, and somehow they fell into a strange routine. They barely spoke at first. Only the necessary things. Your class is at 10. There's food in the kitchen. I'll be late today. It felt less like a marriage and more like two strangers forced into the same space. But slowly, something changed. It started with small things. Ethan noticed that Adrian always woke up early and prepared breakfast, not just for himself, but for him too. He noticed Adrian never crossed boundaries, never entered his room without permission, never treated him like anything other than someone he respected. And that confused Ethan more than anything, because this wasn't what he expected. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Ethan came home and dropped his bag on the couch. I think I'm going to fail, he muttered under his breath. I doubt that, Adrian said from the kitchen. Ethan looked up, surprised. Adrian walked over, holding 2 cups of tea, and handed one to him. You're one of the most focused students I've seen, he added. Ethan frowned slightly. You're just saying that. I don't say things I don't mean, Adrian replied. For a moment, Ethan didn't know what to say. Then he quietly took a sip, and somehow the tea tasted comforting. That night, for the first time, they had a real conversation. Not about the situation, not about the problem, but about themselves. Ethan talked about his family, his struggles, how hard he worked to get into university. Adrian listened, really listened. And when Adrian spoke, Ethan learned something he hadn't expected. Adrian wasn't just a strict professor. He had a past full of responsibility, pressure, and loneliness. I never planned for a personal life, Adrian admitted. Work was always enough. Ethan looked at him. And now, he asked. Adrian hesitated. Now, I don't know. Something about that answer stayed with Ethan. Weeks later, something unexpected happened. Ethan fainted. It was sudden. One moment he was standing in the kitchen, and the next, everything went black. When he woke up, he was lying on the bed. Adrian was beside him, worry clearly visible on his usually calm face. "You're awake," Adrian said softly. "What happened?" Ethan asked, his voice weak. "You collapsed," Adrian replied. "We're going to the hospital." "I'm fine." Ethan tried to sit up. "You're not," Adrian said firmly. And for the first time, Ethan didn't argue. The hospital visit changed everything. Ethan sat there, staring at the doctor, unable to process the words. "This is extremely rare," the doctor explained carefully. "But it's not impossible. Your body is responding differently." Ethan's hands trembled. "You're saying," he swallowed, "I'm pregnant." The room felt suffocating. Adrian stood beside him, completely still. "Yes," the doctor said gently. "We'll guide you through everything, but you'll need support." Ethan couldn't hear anything after that. His mind went blank. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But when he looked down at his hands, they were shaking. And that meant it was... Back home, the silence between them returned. But this time, it was heavier. Ethan sat on the couch, staring at nothing. "I didn't choose this," he whispered. "I know," Adrian replied quietly. "I didn't choose any of this." Ethan's voice broke. Adrian didn't interrupt. "I had a plan," Ethan continued, tears forming. "A normal life, a future that made sense. And now what am I supposed to do?" For the first time, Adrian stepped closer. "Ethan," he said gently. Ethan looked up, his eyes filled with fear. "I'm scared." That one sentence changed everything. Adrian sat beside him. "You're not alone," he said. Ethan shook his head. "You don't understand." "I do," Adrian replied. Ethan laughed bitterly. "How could you?" "Because," Adrian said softly, "I'm scared too." Ethan froze. "I never expected this," Adrian continued. "But running away won't fix it. Then what will?" Ethan asked. Adrian looked at him, really looked at him. "We face it. Together." The months that followed were not easy. There were struggles, emotional breakdowns, moments of doubt. Ethan questioned everything. His identity, his future, his place in the world. But Adrian stayed. Not as a professor. Not even as someone bound by legal papers. But as someone who genuinely cared. He went to every appointment. Cooked every meal. Stayed awake during nights when Ethan couldn't sleep. And slowly, Ethan started to change. Not because the situation became easier, but because he wasn't alone anymore. One night, as they sat quietly on the balcony, Ethan spoke. "Why are you doing this?" Adrian looked at him. "You don't have to," Ethan added. "Once this is over, you can leave." Adrian didn't answer immediately. Then he said something that Ethan wasn't expecting. "What if I don't want to leave?" Ethan's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" Adrian took a breath. "This may have started as a mistake," he said. "But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like one." Ethan stared at him. "I care about you," Adrian continued. "Not because of what happened, but because of who you are." Ethan's eyes softened. For the first time, he didn't feel trapped. He felt seen. Months later, everything changed again. The day their child was born. Ethan held the baby in his arms, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. Adrian stood beside him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "We'll figure it out," he said. Ethan looked up at him, and for the first time, he smiled. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was real. They moved to a new place, away from the university. Started fresh, not as a professor and student, not as strangers bound by mistake, but as a family. And one evening, as they watched the sunset with their child sleeping peacefully nearby, Ethan leaned against Adrian. "You know," he said softly, "this is not the life I planned." Adrian smiled slightly. "I know." Ethan looked at him. "But I think it's the life I needed." Adrian didn't say anything. He just held Ethan's hand. And this time, it felt exactly right.